Well, hello everybody. Welcome either in person or through this recording of our last lecture for the semester for the year for the Hellenic University Club. And we're very happy to have Panayotis or Paddy League as our speaker. Professor League is Assistant Professor of Musicology at Florida State University and the Director of the Center for Music of the Americas. He specializes in the traditional music of the Greek islands, but also of Brazil and Ireland. He holds a PhD in ethnomusicology from Harvard University, where he also served as a James Notopoulos Fellow at the Milman Perry Collection of Oral Literature. His research has been supported by grants from the Fulbright Foundation, the Tsakopoulos Hellenic Studies Center at Sacramento State University, and he's also the recipient of the Victor Papakosma Prize, which is for Best Paper by a grad student at the Modern Greek Studies Association annual meetings. He has published widely in ethnomusicology, in the Journal of Modern Greek Studies, in the Journal of the Society of American Music, the Journal of Greek Media and Culture, the Harvard Review of Latin America, et cetera, but most importantly, his most recent monograph, Echoes of the Great Catastrophe, Resounding Anatolian Greekness in Diaspora, just published this last year by the University of Michigan Press, explores the legacy of Ottoman-era cosmopolitanism among musicians and dancers on the islands of Lesbos and their migrant cousins in the United States. I know particularly in the Massachusetts area where Panayotis did a lot of his field work. And of course, in addition to Tarpon Springs in Florida. His next projects included a history of the role of traditional music and dance, the role that dance has played among the diaspora community in the transition to the United States, particularly in the American South. And also the ethnography of the contemporary Southern instrumental surf rock scenes. Panayotis is not only a scholar, he's an active performer and recording artist. He plays the fiddle, lute, accordion, percussions, bagpipes, and he's played in venues around the world, has recorded CDs. And in fact, in 2018, he was awarded a Traditional Artist Fellowship from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. And in 2019, he was named a Master Artist by the Florida Folklife Program for his work in performing and teaching traditional music and oral poetry of Kalymnos. He's currently working on several recordings featuring his instruments, and he is coming to us today to talk about the great variety of both practical and intellectual dimensions that his work carries, particularly in the Greek music of the diaspora in Tarpon Springs. So please, everybody, in person or hearing the recording, welcome Panayotis. Thank you, Panayotis, for coming to Philadelphia.
Ευχαριστώ, Κωστή μου. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, however virtually and however pixelated, depending on how good my connection is or not. Apologies for taking a minute to get connected, but this is the world we live in. And I'm doubly honored to be virtually zooming into Philadelphia because on my father's side of the family, my father's Irish, but they came to Philadelphia from Ireland, and I have a great number of Irish relations in your fair city. So I'm long overdue for a visit. So don't tell any of them that I was here, because there would be hell to pay. But it's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be invited. So I'm, as Dr. Kureli said, I'm going to be talking for the next 40 minutes or so about the musical and poetic and more broadly speaking cultural traditions in my hometown of Tarpon Springs, Florida. But I figured I would start off in a musical vein here. And let me just make sure that my audio settings are optimized for music. This is not the device I'm used to using, but this should be okay. Can you just let me know? I know that Zoom has improved itself greatly over the last couple of years. Can you hear that okay with nothing breaking up? Okay, excellent. So I'll play a little bit of song. have to tune. I'll play a little bit of a song that in Tarpon Springs, as well as on the island of Kalymnos, which has supplied Tarpon with the majority of its inhabitants, and well, its Greek inhabitants anyway, and I suppose the balance of its cultural weight. This is a song that in both of those places is considered one of the most auspicious pieces of music and poetry that that one can sing and play, especially at the very beginning of any event. It's the first song that we sing at any gledi or panegyri or religious or familial event. And it's an isos dance, isios as they call it in other places. And we usually call it okotikos skopos, the melody from the island of Kos. We also call it yalla. And I'm going to sing, well, I'll explain this in a minute. I'm not 100% sure exactly what I'm going to sing, but hopefully I'll remember what I sang afterwards so I can explain it to you. But we sing verses that are auspicious and have to do with welcoming people together. So that's what we're going to start with.
I know I will.
So there you have it, yalla, or okotikos skopos. So I sang two couplets, two rhyming couplets, what we call mandinades in Greek. The word mandinada, curiously enough, it's an Italian word, matinada, which means a little bit of poetry, a verse that you would sing in the matina, the morning time, in the morning. Not because you woke up at 5 a.m. and like another of Philadelphia's favorite sons, Rocky Balboa. Not that you got up and had your raw eggs and went out for a run all around the city, but because you've been out carousing all night and you've wound up in the wee hours as the sun is coming up, singing serenades in front of somebody's house, probably a comely girl who you or one of your parea is in love with, or something like that. So this is the dominant poetic form throughout the Greek islands, almost without exception. Certainly in the Dodecanese Islands, on the island of Crete, on the island of Karpathos and Kalymnos, and in the Western Ionian Islands, it's also the dominant form of poetry, although there it's called they're called rhymnes, and in Cyprus it's also the dominant form of oral poetry. There it's called tsatista. So the mandinava is a rhyming couplet, so it's a two-line poem in what in Greek philology we call iambic decapentameter, which just means it's 15 syllable lines made out of iambs, so a short syllable and a long syllable. Da 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 da. So, like I said, this is the dominant form of poetry all over these islands, and certainly in Kalymnos, and by extension in my Choryo of Tarpon Springs. So I sang two mandinades. The first one is one that we almost always sing. It's almost always the very first thing that we sing at any kind of function or social event. And it says, Χίλια καλώς ευρέθημε και πάλι να βρεθούμε. Του χρόνου τούτο τον καιρό να ξανανταμωθούμε. So 1,000 times well we came together, and may we come together again. And this time next year, may we be together in fellowship and communion. So I particularly like that one. And like I said, we almost always sing it at the beginning of any kind of event. And then I sang a second one, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I did. Απόψε η παρέα μας αξίζει χιλιάδες άσπρα. Τον κάμπο με τα λούλουδα, τον ουρανό με τ' άστρα. So our parea, our group of friends, of people who've come together tonight, deserves thousands of aspra, or of silver coins. Our parea deserves the plains with all the flowers and the sky with all its stars. So the Kalymnian tradition is no exception to the general rule of Greek folklore that states that we must exaggerate whenever possible, because exaggeration, especially for auspicious reasons, is a path to God's ears. Pardon me while I tune slightly here. And I'll introduce you to this instrument I'm playing. This instrument is called lauto. So this is a particularly beautiful one. You can see this gorgeous maple and rosewood back. This was made by actually my kumbaros and my best friend in Greece, Dimitris Rapakousios, fantastic luthier. So this instrument is called the lauto. It's, as you can tell by the name, a cousin of the European lute. Both the lauto and the European lute are descendants of the Arabic instrument called oud, alud, which is a similar instrument. It's got a round back like this one, but it's got a very short neck that has no frets on it. So it's kind of like an upright bass in that regard. This has been the traditional, this and instruments related to it, like the tambouras or the bulgari, which you can see on the wall behind me, this instrument right here, have been for many hundreds of years the traditional troubadour instruments of the Greek world, both the Greek Aegean and the mainland, although these traditions have more or less died out on the Greek mainland over the last couple of hundred years. There's a lot of iconographic evidence, as well as instances in folklore and various other sources telling us that instruments like this were the preferred the preferred accompaniment to all kinds of different song genres all over the Greek world for a very, very long time, really until the encroachment of modernity. And in the Dodecanese Islands, it still retains a very special place because, as you might have been able to hear, it's an instrument capable of playing melodies at the same time that it plays chords, plays big, rhythmic and harmonic accompaniment. So it's a very versatile instrument, and it's really in a lot of ways the backbone of the musical traditions of the Greek islands, and Kalymnos is no exception. And I spend all this time talking about the laudo at the beginning of this of our evening together, because this instrument has been really instrumental. It's been very central to my own personal journey as a musician and as somebody who's dedicated to not just preserving but pushing forward these traditions that we've been lucky enough to inherit into this century and hopefully beyond. Sometimes it feels like I'm not sure if it's going to last another decade, but luckily there are some very talented young people who are starting to learn this stuff. So, sorry, let me just tune a little bit more. We often say, laudo players, we spend half of our time tuning and the other half of our time playing out of tune. That's an exaggeration, but sometimes it feels that way. So, like Dr. Kureli said, I grew up in Tarpon Springs, Florida. I'm sure most of you know quite a bit about Tarpon Springs, it being kind of a singular place, not kind of, absolutely a singular place on the landscape, on the map of Greek America, for a couple of reasons. I think most significantly, it is the only municipality in the United States, or frankly, probably outside of Greece, that for much of the last 100 years has had either a majority or at least a practical majority of its inhabitants claiming Greek descent. And it's certainly a town that has been dominated politically, socially, and artistically by Greek people, which is not something you can say about anywhere else in the United States or Canada. Of course, there are many, many places, such as Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Chicago, et cetera, that have very large Greek populations and have a section of the city that is primarily, or at least abundantly populated by Greeks who are very, very present, very, very active, very visible and audible. But Tarpon Springs is unique in that since their arrival, Greeks have, like I said, really dominated the life of the city. As you may know, Tarpon Springs is a small town today, accounting for the expansion of the city, of the population out towards the edge of the actual city limits. The population is something around 20,000 people. But the core part of the city has always been dominated by Greeks since 1906, 1907, when the first group of sponge divers from the islands of Hydra, and Aegina, and a few other islands, Spetses, Kefalonia, which is where my family is from, all showed up. Prior to that, Tarpon Springs had been a fairly sleepy place that was populated by local Floridians, both Anglo and African American, a substantial minority of white Bahamians, people from the Bahamas, and it was also something of a resort town for wealthy northerners. It was a very sleepy, quiet place. Sponge diving, sponge fishing had been happening there for quite some time. But when these virgin sponge beds in the Gulf of Mexico were discovered, all hell broke loose. And like I said, several thousand Greek sponge divers from various islands, first from the Saronic Gulf Islands and then from Kalymnos, which had a monopoly on Mediterranean sponging for many centuries, showed up and completely changed the character of the town. I'm sure some of you who are listening to this have been to Tarpon Springs or have family or friends who live there or who have visited. It is quite a unique place in the landscape of Greek America, for all these reasons that I've mentioned. And the traditional music of the city is one of its traditional music and dancing is one of its calling cards. Tarpon is famous throughout the Greek world for the quality of its dancers and singers in particular. We have a local Greek dance group, Levendia, which consistently wins prizes at all kinds of Greek dance festivals and has been invited to perform in Greece many, many times. There are a couple of reasons I think why the music and dance traditions of Tarpon Springs are so strong and so remarkable. And they have to do with the relative, when I say relative, homogeneity and unified cultural character of the community. The vast majority of people in Tarpon Springs, Greek people in Tarpon Springs, descend from the island of Kalymnos, famously known as Tonisi, Ton Sfungaradon, the island of the sponge divers, because as I said, people from Kalymnos held a near monopoly on sponge diving in the Mediterranean for many hundreds of years. And they brought that tradition, those techniques, and that culture revolving around the annual cycle of sailing, diving for sponges, celebrating the divers' return, mourning their absence, and mourning their very frequent death and injury. The musical traditions of Tarpon really revolve around all of this. So I'll play and sing another song here that is very intimately associated with sponge diving. Many of you probably know this song. It's known as Thalasaki, my little sea, Thalasaki. And it's been recorded dozens, if not hundreds of times by artists across the spectrum of genres in Greek and not just Greek music. But it's particularly associated with Kalymnos, probably because of the really emotional, heart-wrenching nature of some of the lyrics that are typically sung to it. I'll sing the mandinada, or the rhyming couplet that's most frequently associated with this song, that says, "Thalassa τους θαλασσινούς, μην τους θαλασσοδέρνεις, ροδός θα μόνα γίνεσαι, την πόρκα τους να ρένεις," which means, Thalassa, sea, my dear beloved sea, please don't beat the sailors with your waves. Μην τους θαλασσοδέρνεις, wonderful word. Don't sea beat them. Rather, become rose water and sprinkle yourself on their forelocks, I guess, the hair here at the front of their head. Borka, it's a Kalymnian word for this, like the Superman curl, you know. So this is the song Thalasaki. Now, most of you have probably heard this song, and you've probably heard it played. Maybe, you know, it was recorded by Yanis Parios, you know, all these kinds of singers, and they usually do it in this style, a very modern style where the lautu is playing kind of like a guitar, like this. sakimu, Dios Allah soternis Allah sakimu, Yefere topulakimu. Right? This is a very modern way of doing this. I'm going to play right now for you the way that we play it in Tarpon Springs, the way that they do it in Kalymnos, using this very open, aggressive, percussive style on the lauto, and this very full-throated Kalymnian vocal technique. So this song, like I said, is very intimately associated with the sponge divers and sponge diving culture. It's one of these songs that for us, for those of us whose families historically have had something to do with sponge diving, as mine has. My people were not divers, but we were sponge merchants and had a sponge packing house and a sponge diver supply store. For those of us with a hereditary connection to the industry of sponge diving, there are a number of songs that are particularly special, especially the ones like Thalasaki that involve some kind of supplication to the forces of nature to protect our beloved divers and sailors, or the ones that that mourn those that we've lost. So Thalasaki is certainly one of those. So here's the Kalymnian version of Thalasaki. So that's a very typical song that we sing quite a bit in Tarpon Springs. So we also have a lot of repertoire, a lot of songs and a lot of dances that very explicitly have to do with sailing and with nautical culture in general. Because, as I mentioned before, the backbone of the community has always been of people whose professions are tied very intimately to the sea. Divers, fishermen, boat makers, people who maintain boats, people who have run businesses that cater to sailors and fishermen and sponge divers and the like. So we have quite a number of songs that we have inherited from the Dodecanese island tradition, primarily from Kalymnos, but that we have continued to practice and sing and dance to and add to over the intervening century. And I mean, at this point, what is it, 2022? So our community has been going strong for 116 years on the Gulf Coast of Florida, in Pinellas County, a little bit north of Clearwater. That's quite a remarkable thing, I think, that there's not that there isn't a greater degree of cultural attrition. That I think more often than not, people tend to join, people of other ethnicities and other backgrounds tend to join our community rather than the other way around, through marriage or through association and that kind of thing. So here's a song that I'm particularly fond of. It's called, you might be familiar with it. It's called Varka Yalo, Boat by the Seashore. In the Kalymnian tradition, this is one of our favorite songs for really rapid fire poetic duels between two or more people. It's not, the poetry form is a slightly shorter, simpler one than the mandinada. So like a lot of our music, I keep saying things like, well, I think I'm going to sing these lyrics, or I might sing these other ones. That's not because I don't know how the songs go. That's because in our tradition, songs don't work the same way that they do in a lot of other Greek and English language and other traditions. We don't, in the Kalymnian tradition, we have very few songs that are songs the way that we think about them in America, where you have a set melody with set lyrics and it's always the same way every time. In our tradition, we have what we call skopus, melodies, and each melody has its own particular character and its own particular rhythmic and metrical identity. And so you have to know which type of poetry, which type of line, how many, whether it's a 15 syllable mandinada or a shorter syllable other form of poetry. You need to know which type of poetry fits with this particular melody, and then theoretically you can sing any verse that you want to any melody, as long as it has the right number of syllables and that you know how to make it fit the melody. So I'm going to just I'll sing some rhymes here to this song Varka Yalo, and after the fact, hopefully I'll remember what I sang and I can translate for those of you who are not familiar with Kalymnian Greek. But this song, it has a very enjoyable and easy to sing along chorus. So even though we're not here in person, hopefully someday we can do that. You can sing along from home. The chorus of it goes, you'll recognize it, goes, O triallari laro varka yalo. All right, so here we go. So a little bit of Varka Yalo. γυαλό. So it says, έμαθα κυρά πως έχεις ψαροπούλα και ψαρεύεις. I heard, my lady, that you have a little fishing boat and you take it out fishing. And she says, he says, ήρθα να σου τη γυρέψω για να πάω να ψαρέψω. I came to borrow it from you, to ask if I could borrow it so that I could go fishing. And she says, έχω βάρκα για σεριάνι, μα για ψάρενα δεν κάνει. So I have a boat that's okay for going out for a spin, for a volta, but it's not any good for fishing. And then then the presumably male narrator makes all kinds of double and triple entendres about all the things he's going to do with the boat. It's one of our most beloved kind of fun dance songs, and it's a sirtos. So I've been talking so far about the divers and diving culture, but I would be very remiss if I did not mention the other, if not half, very important cultural kind of subculture of Kalymnos, which is shepherds. So Kalymnos, like all Greek islands and everywhere in Greece, is a very rocky, mountainous place that's really not particularly lush, and it's relatively hard to grow things. But goats and sheep are really good at thriving in those environments. So there's a very active, very vibrant culture of animal husbandry on Kalymnos. And if the sponge divers are particularly fond of the lauto, which I've been playing, and the violin, the shepherds are very fond of this instrument right here, which is called tsabuna. It's a tsabuna. It is a goatskin bagpipe, very popular on the Dodecanese Islands. So, as I like to say, it's a great way to understand the natural environment, the physical environment that shepherds live in on an island, because it's made out of several ingredients that any self-respecting shepherd has literally in their backyard, so to speak. The entire body of a young goat. So this is the neck where the head was attached. These are where the front legs were. Where the back legs were, they're tucked in here, but this is the back of the instrument, the animal. You see this dark spot right there? That's the belly button. So this is the inside of the skin. The outside where the hair is on the inside of this bag. And we actually leave, if I were to take off the chanter, this part that actually makes the noise, and show you inside, you'd see that the hair is still there. We leave it on because it helps hold moisture from the bagpiper's breath. So the body of a young goat, the chanter here, where I put my fingers when I play, is made out of the root of an olive tree, which is already curved in this way. On some islands, they use an actual horn, a horn from a sheep or a goat. On Kalymnos, they always use wood. The blowpipe is also olive wood, and then you can see here, these are two canes. So like river cane, just that grows in the river, dried out reeds, basically. I won't take it apart and show you, but there are two little reeds, just like oboe or bassoon reeds, also made out of the same material, and then everything is held together with beeswax. So 4 very important ingredients that, like I said, pretty much every shepherd has at their disposal. So I'm going to get this working here. Give me 1 second, and then I'll play and sing a typical Kalymnian shepherd song. Hold on. Okay. So the interesting thing about this instrument is that I'm playing the melody on this pipe that has 5 holes, but then I'm playing a movable drone, just like the ison in Byzantine chant. I'm playing a drone note that moves up or down with this other pipe, but I'm playing both pipes at the same time. So it's a very complicated fingering technique. If you've ever seen an ancient Greek vase or something like that that has a satyr on it playing music, they're almost always playing the syrinx, which is basically two pipes sticking out of the mouth that they're playing at the same time. And it's essentially the same thing as this. It's just at some point somebody had the idea to use an inflatable bladder of some kind, so that you wouldn't have to just constantly be doing circular breathing, which means breathing out with your mouth at the same time you're breathing in with your nose. All right, so this is the Tsabuna. I'll play a little bit of a very beloved Kalymnian song called O Voskos ke o Vasilias, the shepherd and the king. And it's a fairly comical tale about a shepherd and a king who make a bet with each other to see who has the most impressive riches, and whoever does have the most impressive riches will get to marry the princess. Of course, the princess is more interested in the shepherd's promises of soft wool and delicious cheese than she is with the king's promises of gold and the palace and that kind of thing. So the shepherd wins the day and the princess. So here's O Voskos ke o Vasilias. So there we go, the Tsabuna. So I'll play one more song, and then suppose if anybody has any questions, we'll open it up. This one is not. Hold on. It's a finicky instrument, the lauto. So this is a song that is very, very much associated with sponge divers. And it's a song that you may have heard before in some version or another. We call it maruli, to maruli. And we very frequently, not lettuce, not the vegetable lettuce, but the paratsugli, the nickname for somebody named Maria, to marul. So I will sing a verse that's very much associated with diving and with the prayers of people who are back on dry land, hoping for the safety and prosperity of the divers. It says, "Tis michanis to forema, thato malamatoso, για να μπει το κορμάκι σου, ίσως και το γλιτώσω." So, from the perspective of somebody, like I said, left at home, praying for the safety of the sponge divers, it says, "I will cover your diving suit with gold," meaning I will take a golden tama, like a votive offering, an image of the sponge diving suit, and I will pray that the Virgin Mary is with you when your body is entering into the suit, so that you will survive and come home to me. So that's a small sampling of some of the music that we play and sing and dance to in Tarpon Springs, and how it intersects with and informs our history as a community. So if anyone has any questions for a few minutes, I'd be happy to answer any.
Panayotis, thank you very much for your performance, but also the explanation of some of the lyrics.
Sure.
I think also you spend more time highlighting some songs and music from Kalymnos.
Yes.
And what do you happen to know, what were the precipitating circumstances under which the Kalymnian music, because it's unique, has been developed? And what were the antecedents of such a music?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you know, it's a little bit difficult for us to know, for us to go back very far in time, because unfortunately, this is one of the subjects, one of the things that people, just generally speaking, have not kept very good records of, or very, because it's just something that changes relatively quickly, musical tastes and what people do. We tend to have an impression that, you know, we hear something and we think it's been that way forever. But it's absolutely not the case. What I can say is that the Sabuna music, the bagpipe music of Kalymnos, is a very unique, very local tradition. All of those islands, the Dodecanese Islands, have, or at least used to have, Sabuna traditions. It survives in various places. Leros has a still strong tradition. Karpathos and Kos, of course. Karpathos, not Kasos very much. Kos doesn't really, but many of these places still have the bagpipe traditions, and you can hear somewhat radical differences in the ways that people play and some of the songs they do. The interesting thing about Kalymnian music is that aside from some of the bagpipe music, very little of the traditional dance music is unique to Kalymnos. Almost every song that we play, sing, and dance to exists somewhere else. And most of the time, we very explicitly recognize that because we call the songs, like I said, Okotikos, the melody from Kos. We have Harkitikos, or, you know, all these song from Halki, Simiaki Susta from Simi, etc., etc., etc. So there's probably a very small amount of the repertoire that's actually indigenous to Kalymnos. We play many songs and tunes that are from Asia Minor that exist in other traditions. But what's interesting is that every single song that's played in a Kalymnian style that's been adapted by Kalymnian musicians and dancers has something strange about it, has something different about it that you can immediately tell that it's from Kalymnos. Sometimes that has to do with just the, we could say, the character, the ethos of the music. Kalymnian music has a very particular style or vibe, but often it's something structural. So, like, for example, we frequently add a beat to a melody that is played elsewhere. We tend to play things very slow. We tend to play Kalamatiana and Sirta very slowly compared to other places in Greece, but we tend to play the Susta really, really fast, these kinds of things. So it's, I think it's more a matter of inflection and of local style than it is the repertoire, because the repertoire in Kalymnos is very similar to all the other Dodecanese islands. Hopefully that answers your question. Great. Any other thoughts or any other questions from anyone?
I'm going to ask hopefully
Sure.
a quick question. I'm kind of following up to George's. So not from the antecedents, but then what happens when the tradition migrates over to Tarpon Springs? Does it, versus the musicians that stay back home? I mean, is there any noticeable divergence, or is the communication still?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of noticeable divergence. And there still is communication. I mean, the most significant thing is that because of the American immigration laws, the Reed-Johnson Act that was enacted in 1929, there was essentially no migration from Greece to the US from 1929 to 1964, I believe. I might have that terminal date wrong, but basically from 1930 until the late 60s, there was hardly any migration. So the community was in something of a vacuum. Of course, people could go back and forth to visit if they had the money, and of course, letters and records would go back and forth. But the tradition really moved on and changed quite drastically until the 1960s, when all of a sudden there was a flood of people coming from Kalymnos again, who really injected a lot of new energy into the local music and dance community, and significantly brought back a lot of dances and songs and musical forms the community had not quite forgotten, but had changed some very substantially and perhaps fallen out of circulation. So today, Tarpon Springs is really renowned as this hotbed of really hardcore Kalymnian music and dance that rivals what's happening on Kalymnos in terms of its supposed authenticity. But that was not the case in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, for sure. It was very much like much of the rest of Greek America, more interested in post-war, post rebetika and that kind of thing, nightclub music. But now there's so much back and forth that sometimes it's very difficult to tell where Kalymnos ends and Tarpon Springs begins in terms of music and dancing. The one major difference is that despite our best efforts, Tarpon Springs has not really produced a critical mass of very skilled instrumentalists who play Kalymnian style music. We have amazing dancers and singers, but very few actual violinists, lauto players, tsabuna players. That's something that I'm working very hard on, trying to incentivize young people to play the music and helping them learn it.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, I find that the music in the music from islands to be different across different islands.
Yes.
Is there a particular reason for that you are aware, that you can share your thoughts with us?
Sure. That's a very big issue. I think the simple answer would be that even though islands are not as isolated as historically as we sometimes are tempted to think, because of course islands produce islanders who are very good at sailing and very good at visiting other places. Hence the large number of songs and tunes from other places. Still, an island is an island, right? And so I think that island societies tend to, even though they are naturally, most of them are very outward looking, which is essential for their survival, especially in the Greek islands. I mean, the Greek islands, as we know, are not like the Polynesian islands. I mean, they're not abundant in all kinds of fresh water and vegetation and this kind of thing. Some of them don't actually even have any fresh water or have very little of it. So from time immemorial, I think people on those islands have been traveling as a necessity just for survival. But they are relatively closed societies traditionally. And so, when you have a critical mass of people who are spending a lot of time together and, different, very distinct traditions develop. And that's, the Greek islands are a fascinating case study in terms of that kind of thing, because there is such similarity in terms of repertoire. There's a lot of common repertoire, but if you take one song like Thalasaki, like I played, you can find it on probably 15, 20 different islands in Greece, but it's going to be very different. The way that they interpret it, the way that they inflect the voice, the different ornaments they do on the violin, how fast they play it, the type of chords they play behind it, the rhythm, how people dance to it. So I think but that's something that's very characteristic of Greek traditional music and dance and culture in general. A lot of recycling and repurposing of raw materials. That's really what we do. So I think hopefully that is some kind of an answer to your question. But
thank you.
Of course.
I don't want to dominate the discussion here, but
no, it's okay.
Why not bouzouki? And
sure. Well, the bouzouki is everywhere now, but
right.
I mean, I guess the simple question is that the simple answer is that the bouzouki has only been around for 120 years or something, right? It's a very new instrument, and it's also, the bouzouki is really good at a lot of things, but it's not really good for playing. It's not a very loud instrument, and it's not very good at playing for dance music. The bouzouki is not really good at playing dance music outdoors without microphones.
Yeah.
And this is outdoor, this is panegyri music. It's music that's supposed to be enjoyed outdoors with people dancing and singing and carrying on and eating and feasting. So you have to have these big, loud instruments. And so we sacrifice perhaps a little bit of dexterity for the sake of volume and energy. So I think that's really why. Although the bouzouki, of course, has become ubiquitous in Greece and on the islands as well as the mainland, for sure.
Very good.
Yes, of course. Does maybe one more question if anybody has one?
I have a question.
Sure.
I was in Tarpon Springs a few years ago, and it feels very Greek. You
Yes.
feel like you're maybe on a Greek island. And my question is, how is the city now? Is it like Astoria, which is, you see the facade of the Greek restaurants and, the Greekness of it, but is it still a majority populated by Greeks? And what are some of the industries? What do people, the young people stay in Tarpon Springs, or do they move?
Right.
Do they leave?
Right. Well, in terms of the population of the city itself, it's not majority Greek. I think it's something like, I don't know, out of 20,000 or so inhabitants, I think maybe 8,000 or 9,000 claim Greek descent, but that's counting the city limits, which stretch, a few miles in every direction. I think the core of the city definitely is dominated by Greeks, by people who self-consciously identify as Greek, whether or not they actually speak the Greek language in their everyday, business or whatever. And a surprising number of young people do stay, because the Greeks, unlike a place like Astoria or like Greektown in Chicago or Detroit or anything, it's not just the facades. Like I said, the local government is dominated by Greek Americans. The local, Chamber of Commerce is dominated by Greek Americans. Greeks are not just running souvlaki stands. Greeks are the mayor. Greeks are like the city commissioner. Greeks are the people, the manager of the, whatever business. So there are the traditional maritime businesses. Tarpon does have, several full-time sponging boats. It still has a sponge fleet. A lot of commercial fishing, a lot of particularly boat building and boat repair, several different marinas and wharfs. And then of course the tourist industry, restaurants, bars, curio shops, this kind of thing. But, you're just as likely as not to, if you take your car to a mechanic, he's going to be a Greek American person, right? If the teachers at the public high school, a lot of them are Greek American. Like I said, heavy involvement in local politics and business. So it really is a Greek identified place. Much like, there are plenty of towns outside of Philadelphia where, quote unquote, everybody is Irish or everybody is Italian, right? They might be third, fourth generation, but there's still that connection to that culture and this shared sense of some kind of cultural unity, even if it's mostly people's imagination. And I think it's very much the same way in Tarpon Springs. The one difference is that we have a very steady stream of people coming from Greece to stay, to work, but almost all of them are from this one island, Kalymnos. And so we have this constant stream of cultural influence that is very focused, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Well, I unfortunately have to sign off in a minute. But it was really it was a pleasure and an honor to join you. I'm very grateful for the invitation. So thank you, Kosti, Dr. Kureli, and everyone for putting this together. And I do hope that I'm able to join you in person at some point. Now that the world is opening back up again, perhaps we can arrange something.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Panayotis. And I want, on behalf of those who are going to watch it later, thank you for for showing us so many things and introducing us to this incredible world.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And
thank
you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Yes, and Kali andamos.
Kali andamos.
Thank you.
Kalinita, παιδιά.
Kalinita.
Γεια σας.
Yes.
You're unmuted. Oh, you want to talk to anybody?
I don't want to talk to anybody.